morning, reader. We are starting a new reading vlog today. So I am going to be talking to you guys about some books by Black authors that are also queer. So it is Black History Month. I don't know when you will be seeing this one, so perhaps it is no longer the case by the time that you're seeing it. But so February is Black History Month in the US. I am not American. I don't think we have anything like this in Belgium. But I am definitely taking the opportunity to read a little bit more of, or like to prioritize more books by Black authors for this particular month. Faith, you want to be involved? Yes, come. I'm not coming to you, you have to come to me. She's a bit shy apparently. So I like to take the opportunity to prioritize books by Black authors at this point in time, but it is not something that I'm like used to doing. I don't tend to really follow those type of thematic months that the US has, but this year for Herkiet I was challenged to kind of do it. I didn't necessarily have to follow along with that, but there's a challenge in Herkiet to read books for specific heritage months, and so the biggest reward for that is if you read them in the actual month of the heritage month, so I want to do that. And because 2026 is the year of spontaneity in which I'm gonna be trying to read whatever I want in the moment, it seems like the perfect opportunity to also really embrace that and not just do like the one required read, but really try and read a little bit more books that fit that particular month's theme. So we're gonna start with February. We're gonna try and read more than one book by Black authors, and I thought I could still maybe like combine it with Herkiet, because when it comes to the books by Black authors that are on my sort of like want to read list, my radar, there's not like a clear favorite. Like there's nothing that I was like immediately like, oh, this means I'm finally gonna pick up this book. Basically, there are two books that I am really excited about reading, and I don't think that either one of them is going to be in this particular vlog, but that is Mama Day by Gloria Naylor, which is a book that I am going to be reading in order to fit hard mode for a particular r/fantasy challenge. And then it is the third book in the Forever Desert series, because I read the first two books within that series and absolutely adored them. So I'm going to be rereading that series and continuing within the month of February. They're all novellas, but I don't think that there's going to be any rep within this one, and I'm going to make this video purely about reading books by Black authors that also have queer rep within them. But so, as I said, I don't really have a clear favorite except for those two books. I'm like, what could I be reading? Am I gonna try to read some classics of Black literature, such as The Color Purple, Their Eyes Were Watching Gods, a James Baldwin, or anything like that? Is this gonna be the direction that I'm gonna give my reading this month? Am I gonna be reading some sort of like new and hot and flashy titles by Black authors? Am I gonna be reading books by Black authors that I've previously read and enjoyed, such as Octavia E. Butler, or Candice Carty-Williams, or Kylie Reid? I didn't really have a preference when it came to that, so when I thought of the idea of like, maybe I can combine this with a Herkiet challenge that I haven't really made a whole ton of progress in, I was like, actually, let's do that. So the Herkiet challenge that I've made the least progress in, it's probably not the least, there is one that I made no progress in so far, but one of the Herkiet challenges that I haven't really made a whole ton of progress in thus far is the Queer Alphabet Challenge, in which you need to read books for different representations, different types of queerness. And I have read for the lesbian representation, the trans representation, and the bi representation. I think those are the only ones, but I do have a few left to go. I think I have gay, polyamory, intersex, and asexual left. Maybe there's another one that I'm just not thinking of right now, but those I definitely still have left to go, and so I'm going to be trying to get through those in reading books by Black authors within the month of February. So this vlog can span until the end of February potentially, depending on when I pick up books for this. Fate! Come! She's been all about sitting on my lap the last few days, so I think that she's just really desperate for me to go and sit in the sofa because she has food I just fed her. So, or it's food that she's not happy with, but she was immediately eating it because I gave her the cat milk today. But so yeah. We'll just have to endure cat's meows in the background. My apologies. So I have started a first book and I'm actually already 73% into it. I started it 2 nights ago and that is Luster by Raven Leilani, which is a book that has polyamory representation within it. Now, this is a book about a messy life. Messy millennial is basically the code word for this book, I guess. We're following a young black woman who lives in New York and she's working in publishing, and throughout the book we find out that she's had a little bit of a messy childhood and that reflects in a messy adulthood as well. She's living in a little bit of a rundown apartment that she's sharing with another black girl. They're sharing rent there because they cannot really afford anything else. She is very promiscuous. She's sleeping around at the office as well, which is not really that great for your career opportunities, and she is getting involved with a guy who is married. And this is where the polyamory comes into play because he has an open marriage. His wife has basically agreed to an open marriage. However, there are some rules attached to it, and pretty early on our protagonist actually meets the wife, and the dynamic between the three of them is messy, but also just this relationship is a complete red flag. Now, let me tell you, if you want positive polyamory rep, I can already tell you this is not going to be it, okay? Because, as I said, this relationship is red flags, and the dynamic between the three of them is not open, is not very communicative, neither. So our, the wife of the married man definitely seems intrigued by this girl that he has decided that he wants to have a relationship aside from his marriage for. But that relationship is also fraught with a lot of like power dynamics and power struggles, where it definitely feels like this woman is trying to, you know, one up our protagonist, trying to show off her you know, her assets, the way that, like, what makes her superior, trying to show off her superiority, and not in a sort of like overt way. She's not overtly aggressive or confrontational with our protagonist. She's actually like kind to our protagonist, is like helping her out in certain situations later down the line in which our protagonist is very much in difficult financial straits, but there's definitely this undertone of her, yeah, there's a sizzling tension underneath of this situation that is going on in the background, and them most of the time not really openly discussing that, but that always being in the background of all their interactions. And our protagonist on her end definitely seems to feel some sort of an attraction to her as well. At the very least, she's very much attracted to the wife's sort of like comfort in her own body, comfort in showing her body and sharing her body. And so that tension is there in the background, but there's also a lot of tension between our protagonist and this man that she has decided to enter into a relationship with. And I get the feeling that our protagonist is basically looking for somebody to punish her, because there is a moment early on within their relationship in which he kind of shoves her in a moment of sort of like annoyance, and she kind of encourages him to continue shoving her, and there are multiple moments in which she gets hurt through circumstance and she is craving that hurt. She wants to hurt more, and I'm not necessarily sure whether it is punishments that she's seeking or whether she just wants to feel hurt physically to kind of reflects the hurt that she feels inside, because she definitely seems like a broken person, and we definitely find out a lot about her past that would lead to her emotional state not being perfect, or her definitely carrying a lot of baggage with her. She had an early pregnancy, she lost her mother at a young age, her mother was also a drug addict, so there are a lot of things in her past that definitely have not gone smoothly. And currently she's just sleeping around, but it also isn't like she's making real connections with the people that she's sleeping. She's sleeping as a transactional sort of like deal, and transactional not in the sense that she's necessarily getting money every time that she does so, but it just seems like it's a need for her to have this physical contact, and you know, that's what she's getting out of it, but she's not interested in the actual man that she's having these relations with. And that is also clear when it comes to our male lead, when it comes to this married man, because there are a few times throughout the book in which he's indicating that, you know, maybe she should just go and look for somebody else, because he is basically using abstinence as a punishment, it seems like. There are multiple times within this book in which he refrains from having sex with her. It takes a while for him to have sex with her, even though she wants this to happen immediately. And there are a few times throughout this book in which he kind of withdraws sex from her in order to keep control over the situation, have power over her. And this is sort of like a form of punishment. A form of punishment that she, to some extent, also, as I said, seems to relish, but she's then indicating like, okay, I really, really am desperately in need of some more physical contact. It's been forever since I've had sex. Maybe I should just go and look for somebody else. And we've seen throughout this book that she doesn't really lack for opportunity, apparently, but she isn't willing to do that. She isn't willing to just step away from the situation, and she's always just saying like, I put too much work into this man to just give up now. But it is never about the feeling. It is never about like, oh no, I really desperately want Eric, I don't want any other man. Like one of the things that is in favor of him is the fact that like when she had her first sort of like sex with this guy, it was like the first time that she came in a long time. It's the first climax in a long time, so that definitely speaks in his favor. But yeah, she's always kind of talking about it in those terms, as in like, I've invested too much time into this, you know, it's like an investment of my time and my efforts, and so that cannot just go to waste, rather than having any sort of emotional connection with him, which you would think there would need to be in order for you to want to stick with such a messy situation. Which is why I'm saying that I kind of have this feeling like she wants to be punished, she wants to feel hurt, because, you know, she's sticking true in this very awkward, difficult, tense situation, and you know, she could try to walk out of it. There are definitely points later in the book that there are other reasons why it's difficult for her to walk out, but it definitely feels like there is some sort of a masochistic, that's how you say it in English, right? Reasoning behind why she's staying, that there has to be something like that. Like a positive for this book, I will definitely say, is that this couple has a black girl who they are fostering, I think. I don't think that they've adopted her, and she has been placed in multiple homes already, so she's really hoping for a stable environment for this to stay for this to be somewhere where she can stick around. She knows what is going on, so she knows the precariousness of the situation, and so initially she's very resentful towards her protagonist. She's very much like not wanting her to be there because she will ruin her situation, but she's also sort of the only other black woman in her life. She doesn't really have black friends or black people around her, because she's very much living in a predominantly white neighborhood. And so throughout the book, there is a bond that forms between the two of them. It's not a bond that's like openly spoken about. It's very much a reluctant bond, because, as I said, this teenage girl definitely wants to steer clear and definitely wants our protagonist to keep her space, to not get involved. Whenever she sees injustice towards the young girl is like, don't even say anything about it. It is the way it is. And our protagonist also isn't necessarily openly admiring of this young girl or giving any indication to us as the reader that she is like very tight with this girl, but she shows it. She shows it through her care for what the girl is doing, her conversation with the girl, and through actions, because at one point in time she, as I indicated, is very much in financial difficulty. She acquires some money, and while she does put some of that money aside for when she will need it at a later time, she also uses part of that money to take the girl to a hairdresser and to get her hair properly seen to, because her parents don't really know how to take care of black hair, and clearly she hasn't really been taught correctly how to do so. And so she does kind of take on that mentorship towards this young girl and taking care of it financially, where she could have also just kind of been indicated to the parents, like, you should be taking her to a hairdresser, or like, I'll take her to a hairdresser, can you just give me the money? That of course is a little bit more difficult because of the situation that is in the background, but I mean, I do think that it would have been possible for her to do this or just to leave the situation as it is if she really didn't care about the girl. So I do really appreciate that side of the book. The writing style is very messy, the way that the protagonist is. And with messy, I don't mean like, oh, it's horribly written. I just mean it's like there is no clear direction to the story. There's no real point that we're building up to. It is very much just meandering. We are just like going through the motions, stream of consciousness style. That's not necessarily a negative. I am enjoying the book, but it's also like, this book could end in the next page and I'll be like, oh yeah, is that it? So this is the type of book where I feel like it's just about the moment and this particular situation, and it isn't building to anything. It isn't going to give us this huge reflection about the life of this woman. I basically expect it to end as messy as it has been going thus far. So we'll have to see when I finish it how I feel about it, but it isn't a negative. I am enjoying listening to the book, I am following along, I am enjoying my time with it, but there is not much of an intrigue about what is going to come next, about how things are developing, because this is so stream of consciousness, I feel like. But so yeah, I'll get back to you when I've read more of it and when I've picked up another book for this particular project. But overall, currently I'm feeling a little bit lackluster about it. Sorry, I've been wanting to say that the entire video. But so yeah, we'll see. We'll see what my thoughts are when I get through this, which will happen pretty quickly because today I'm going to be spending most of my time trying to get organized before my trip to Tenerife. And so I will not be vlogging while I'm in Tenerife, so there will definitely be a time gap of 1 week within this vlog. But yeah, I am definitely thinking that this one will be finished today still, and perhaps that also means I can still pick up and finish another one today, which is going to be very short for one of the other representations. But so yeah, with that, let's check in later. Hello, I am back from holiday. I have been back for a few days, but you know, I came back from holiday. I arrived at home like 9 o'clock in the evening, went back to work the very next day. So this is like the first time I feel like I have some time to actually update you guys. But so, I have finished Luster, of course, in the meantime. I finished Luster before I went on holiday, and then I started and finished another book also before I went on holiday. So let's see if I still have some thoughts to share about them. I don't think I have very much more to share about Luster, except for that it definitely like felt... It didn't, like, I was kind of hoping that at the ending of this book was gonna make me go like, oh, okay, or like, oh yeah, that's like interesting angle or whatever, or it would have made me feel a certain way about what had come before as in a progression towards that point. And it just more or less felt like everything had felt throughout that book as being like, it is something that happens and then it's something that is no longer happening. So yeah, I'm not fully sold on this book, nor am I like harsh on the book in the sense of like, oh, what was that? What a horrible book. Why is that written? It's just something that I feel like I read, I had an okay time with, and that was that. But then I also read The Deep by River Solomon. So Luster was counting for polyamory, and The Deep by River Solomon is going to be counting for intersex. It could also count for gender fluid. People have been counting for that, but I'm just going to keep it to one queer identity for this book. So I'm counting it for that, and I'm also going to be counting it for the merfolk challenge within Herkiet, so that I can use a book that I've currently got slotted into that spot for another one. The Deep by River Solomon basically imagines the fate of pregnant African slaves who were dumped overboard on the passage to the US, and how the children that they gave birth to, and how they gave birth to a new species, let's say, which is a type of merfolk. And we are following a protagonist. I want to call her Tui now, but that's totally not her. Tetsu? Oh, I don't remember her first name. We are following a protagonist who's basically the history keeper of these people. Basically, there's one person within their society who's always kind of controlling or keeping their history with them. They're carrying the history of who they are as a people, how they came to be, what happened in their past. And this burden is kind of carried over from person to person across the generations. Now, our current protagonist has very much suffered under this burden. Like, I've been calling it burden because that's how she feels about it. But, for example, her predecessor very much considered it an honor to be carrying that. And that is also what the people kind of feel, you know, that she has the honor of carrying their history. And then every once in a while they have this sort of like ritual in which she shares their history with them to kind of keep them connected to their history, to their ancestry, to the stories of the people who came before them. And you know, when too much time passes in between, they start to feel adrift and they start to feel the need for that history. However, the history is so hard and so challenging to bear that that load has been passed on to one person for most of the time, so that the remaining people can kind of thrive, I guess. However, as I said, our protagonist is really kind of struggling with the burden of carrying this history, of carrying these stories, and also with the burden of being the only one to have these stories, the only one to really understand what she is struggling with, because those around her only see it as an honor for her to be able to carry this information. And so she cannot really, you know, talk to others about them because others don't really know their history most of the time. And at some point in the story she will kind of set herself free from this burden and will kind of explore beyond that. And so the book is a lot about that, about, you know, the burden of history, the burden of being weighed down by the past, of what happens to your people before you, but also the importance of holding on to that legacy, of knowing what came before you, knowing what your ancestors had to endure, knowing where your people came from, and what they have had to overcome within the past. But also a look at her kind of reevaluating these stories, getting a new look at them from a new perspective through circumstances later on. I really thought this one was very interesting of a story. It is a novella, so it's quite short, of course, so it doesn't really go in deep, but I think that is also, it doesn't go in deep, the deep. But I think that is also just ideal. I think that this concept, which apparently originally was a song, I believe, that this concept does definitely lend itself to a short, snappy, powerful exploration rather than a drawn out full-fledged story. You know, you could make a full story about this where, you know, she goes away from her people and has all of these adventures, and through her adventures learns that, and you could draw that out endlessly. But I do think that it wouldn't pack more of a punch if you draw it out. I think it's like the perfect. It felt like the perfect length for this story. So I definitely highly enjoyed enjoyed. I thought it was a very fascinating read, a very fascinating exploration. So I do definitely want to read more by River Solomon. River Solomon is intersex themselves, and the characters are as well. And yeah, I have not read any other book by a Black author that was also queer. In the meantime, I have read The Lives of the Ujungo. I've reread The Lives of the Ujungo while I was on holiday. So I went for a week to Tenerife. We were staying on the north side of the island and on Puerto de la Cruz. And yeah, we had a great time there. We took the car for 3 days or so, and we went to the volcano, so to the Teide. And then we also went to a few towns along the north coast. We went to San Cristobal de la Laguna. We went to Guarachico, I think the name is, to, oh yeah, I already Fivots, I think, something like that, where there was like this big dragon tree, dragon blood tree, I think it's called. So we had a great time on the island. I did do some reading over there, but not by a Black author, so I won't be counting, so I won't really be talking about that within this video. And then now I'm currently reading 3 books, and only one of them is by a Black author, but I also don't think it's going to be queer, so it's probably also not going to be in this video. So I'm not entirely sure whether I am actually going to have something else within this video still. I do hope to still fit something in by the end of this month, but it'll depend because I'm not really going through the book by the Black author very quickly at the moment. I'm reading Mama Day by Gloria Naylor, which so far fine, but I'm just like, I'm not getting through many pages in a row. I'm not really struggling with the book neither, but you know, my focus is just not at an ideal space right now, because you know, I'm mainly just like audiobooking it these days. Since coming back from my holiday, I haven't really been getting, yeah, I've definitely been feeling the distraction of being back home again and having the TV here, because on holiday I definitely didn't feel like I was on my ideal focus time neither. I definitely felt like I wasn't reading as much as I have read on previous holidays, for example, but I definitely was reading much more. And you know, when I went to bed and you know, in the evenings after having had dinner, we were always just like reading, for example. Whereas now, when I come home from work and I have my dinner, then I put on the TV, you know. So the distraction of the TV has definitely been proving to be a burden for the first few days of my return, where I feel like I have been struggling more to just like grab for the physical book. You know, I have 2 physical books going at the moment. I mean, one is an ebook, but 2 eyeball reads, and it's just been more difficult for me to reach for them at this point in time. So hopefully I'll have some change to that throughout the week to come, because it'll be the final week of the month of February, and I do still want to get some other things done. I do think my audiobook will be done in time for me to maybe still start another audiobook, so I could hopefully still listen to something short by a Black author that's also queer, to fit it in that way, because I think that that's probably, realistically speaking, is going to be the most likely scenario in which I'm going to still fit in another book by a Black author at this point in time, because I just don't think physically it's going to happen. I just don't see it happening. Hello guys, I'm coming at you from a little bit of a disheveled state of being, and that is because I've had a pretty stressful week. Okay, so I a few days ago realized, or like started to think, that Faith might not be hearing well or not be seeing well, or might have like dementia, and so I started to pay attention more to her behavior and to like really try to see if she actually saw or heard me. And then it became clear to me that she's actually lost her eyesight, and it seemed like she still saw a little bit, like she was still kind of responding to light, but then like Thursday evening, it's now Saturday, Thursday evening, she all of a sudden started also like bumping into stuff. So I had made an appointment for her for Monday that is to come, but then on Friday I tried to contact the vet in order to get her opinion about whether I needed her to be seen earlier, because, you know, like I knew the blindness itself, maybe they wouldn't be able to do anything about it and might not be a real bad thing, but because it had happened so quickly and it was evolving so quickly, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything more seriously going on. And so it took me a long time to get contact with them, because I'd called them first thing in the morning, they tried to call me back, but I always have my sound off, and I just noticed too late. I saw like the final second in which it was lit up on the screen before they stopped trying to contact me. And then, you know, 2 hours later they still hadn't tried again, so I called them again to be like, yeah, I missed the call, but I'm still here. So they put another note in for that, for the vet to call me back. But then at 2 o'clock that still hadn't happened, so in the end I decided like I'm just gonna write an email. I had intended to do that the evening before, but then I was like, you know, let's not write an email, let me just call first thing in the morning, rather than me writing an email now and then like first thing in the morning being like anxious about when are they gonna contact me back. But in the end it is actually the email that they responded to the first, because of course in the email they already had the full information, and so you could immediately see like, okay, this cat needs to come in. So I went to the vet with Faith, and indeed she didn't see a thing. The vet tried multiple tests, like also the response to a torch, and she said like, yeah, there's like a tiny bit of response to that, but basically the vision is gone. And then she also like dropped like very small things, very small balls of paper like near her, and she didn't change like directions to see it, so she was like, yeah, she's not seeing anything. And that has to do with high blood pressure. Now this is a common thing with cats that have thyroid issues, which she has, and I had been feeling for a while that I wasn't really sure that the thyroid medication was really helping all that much, because she, to me, doesn't seem like she's gained enough weight. But the first time that we did the check of the medication, the blood results came in balanced, so it was working. And so they did do another blood test yesterday, and so I'm relieved to know that the thyroid balance and the thyroid numbers are indeed still in balance, so she is having the correct like medication level for that. And so this issue of the high blood pressure is not coming from the thyroid in this particular case. It is just coming from old age, unfortunately, because my queen is between like 13 and 16 years old at this point in time. She was adopted by me some 6 years ago, so you know, we don't actually know her exact age. That is just an estimate. But so yeah, she is on the older side of things, and so it is normal for this to start happening. And unfortunately, a high blood pressure you won't really notice until something like this happens. So it can affect multiple things: the eyes, the brain, the heart, and the liver. And so the eye is definitely affected, and the liver values were also not amazing, but they were also not dramatic yet. So hopefully, as she's now on medication for the high blood pressure, we can keep her healthy for quite some time yet. It is possible that the vision can kind of come back, but the vet wasn't very positive about that, probably because of the extent of the loss of sight. You know, if it was less, then probably maybe we could regain something again. And I'm just going into this with the mentality of like, she's not getting that back, and that is fine. I know cats can really get around very well with when they're blind. You know, it's of course an adaptation period in which she has to learn where everything is again. But you know, I think that is going to be more or less fine. I can also already see improvement when it comes to that. She's very confidently finding her water bowl, her food bowl, and her litter box. So it's just a sofa that's currently still the issue. But maybe it's also just a comfort thing where she doesn't really want to be on the sofa. I've had a few stressful days. I'm a little bit disheveled. Reading has clearly not been a priority for me for the past few days. I was gonna have very little time to read today, which I'm not gonna do because I need to kind of keep an eye on her because of the medication, because she's on pretty high dosage of this medication for about 10 days. And so I need to keep an eye on her to make sure that, you know, she doesn't show signs of her blood pressure dropping too much. And so yeah, for this first weekend I definitely didn't feel confident leaving her alone. I will leave her alone at some points throughout the week when I'm going to be working. But and I think that I'm gonna work like from the office the first 3 days of the week, and then Thursday and Friday I'm gonna work from home, because actually in hindsight I'm thinking like probably when she's just started the medication is actually the safest time, because the blood pressure will not have dropped that far yet. Because originally my thinking was like, I need to be with her especially in the beginning because she's just on this medication, she might like that's the most dangerous time. But actually, you know, the real danger here was in her blood pressure dropping too much, which I guess is more likely to happen towards the end of the 10-day period. But so yeah, I had a very stressful Friday, mainly because of the issues with, you know, like wanting news from the vets, and like feeling like the longer that it took for them to be able to reach me, the less likely it was for me to still be able to get her seen that same day, even though they also, of course, there is like a vets that you can go to out of office hours and stuff like that. So it would have still been possible, of course, but I was just getting very anxious about that. And then like I was working from home, and like all of these people were contacting me at the same time with all of these questions. There was a crisis coming from one of my colleagues for a case that I had to kind of like look into and see what had happened thus far, because I hadn't been involved up until that point. And so like my brain wasn't really fully there at that point in time, because it was mainly with faith at that moment. So I had a stressful Friday, but luckily, you know, having been able to go to the vet has really like calmed that down immensely. I'm battling a little bit of a cold, so that's also not ideal. But hey, we are here to talk about the final book that I'm reading, that is by a Black author and that also is queer, and that is The Macabre by Kosoko Jackson. This is a new release. It is from September, I believe, September 2025. It is one that I was hoping to get to in October as well, but I didn't end up being able to squeeze it into my very busy October month. This is a horror novel in which we're looking at a painter who is pulled into a association that is linked to the British Museum, because he turns out to be the ancestor of a painter who made a series of supernatural paintings that are referred to as the macabre, and all of these have specific powers, specific dark powers. And so he, as an ancestor of this painter and being linked to a magical power himself, which he didn't know up until that point in time, is going to be able to help them neutralize these paintings. And this has a queer romance in it, it has a gay romance in it, and so that is another one of the queer alphabets that I can tick off after having finished this book. I'm currently close to finishing it. I have 2 hours left of this, and I will say that I've been enjoying it, but I also am losing a little bit of my interest with it. What I like about this is that it is talking about the harm of certain institutions, the harm that the British Museum has perpetrate throughout history, and kind of showing the dark side of those institutions in a present day setting. Do I know whether the British Museum is still a dark colonizing power? No idea, but that is what this book is kind of running with the power of institutions over individuals as well, rather not just over marginalized individuals, but just over individuals in general, and then indeed looking at that sort of like dynamic with marginalized societies, marginalized art, and the power of an institution like British Museum compared to that. So I like those type of like, not necessarily discussions, it's not like this book goes into a deep discussion about this, but it is definitely at the heart and center of the plot line, and so it is definitely explored through the plot, not really spelled out, but if you have somewhat of an understanding of the, you know, controversy around surrounding the British Museum, and how every item in the British Museum has a questionable origin, except for the British ones, I guess. It has a questionable origin in terms of how the British Museum acquired these treasures. Even when they were purchased, the question is like how much of a deal was struck, how much of a fair deal was struck at the time. And a lot of nations are requesting some of their artifacts back from the British Museum, and the British Museum is not really cooperating with that. And I get that from the power of institution side of things. You know, they will not have anything left, of course, which is the sort of like downfall, of course, of an institution like that. An institution that is that powerful, of course, is not going to want to do that. But yeah, that is sort of like, for me, an interesting side of this book. And I also really like the queer romance that is happening within here. I really like both of these characters, and their interactions I've very much enjoyed. This is also a really like a world that is like secretly steeped in magic, because, as I said, our protagonist didn't know he had magical power up until the beginning of this book, more or less. But he also gets put into this sort of like way house at some point in time for his safety, and that house kind of is like an intelligent house that can kind of send him off somewhere for his like where the house thinks that he needs to be and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm enjoying this one. It is not like a super 4-star, 5-star book at the moment yet, because I do feel like my interest is kind of waning a little bit the further that we get along with this book. But yeah, hopefully it can still turn it around in like the final 2 hours of the audiobook and get me fully on board again, and then maybe I'll change my rating upwards again. But so yeah, hoping to find back like sort of my oomph into the story, because currently I've kind of lost that spark of interest, and I'm kind of more like going through the motions as I'm listening to the audiobook, and that I'm actually like engaged with my mind and my thoughts going around thinking about like, ooh, that's an interesting point, or oh, that's an interesting direction. So yeah, hopefully that'll soon change. Finished! I have finished the Macabre, and I've decided that I am gonna give it a 4-star rating, because towards the end, like, there was already a suspicion of this, but towards the end there was one particular theme or sort of like trope that I really enjoy that came into play, and there was another one as well that I had also kind of hoped for the story to develop in that direction, and it ended up doing so. So yes, I am happy. And this book actually ends in a way that would open it up to a sequel. I don't think I necessarily want a sequel to this. I think it was good, and I enjoyed it, and I loved the theming in it, as I discussed, and I love the characters in it as well. But I'm also very like, I'm happy to have seen the story rounded off the way that it currently is, and I don't necessarily need something else. But of course, the author could always take a very interesting approach to the second book, have some sort of a direction for the second book that I'm just currently not thinking of, because, you know, I'm not an author, my imagination is not that great. So, you know, it could definitely be the case that the author is able to make a sequel to this that is absolutely worthwhile. It's just that I went into this not expecting it to be a series, and now I'm like, oh, this actually could just continue on into a new book, and you know, I don't necessarily think I need that because it's just gonna make the series quite how do we call that? Like episode of the week type of deal, you know, where you have like TV shows, for example, where each episode is a story in and of itself, and it's not necessarily following much of an overarching story. There is part of an overarching story that can bleed us into the second book if there is going to be a sequel to this, but it's going to have to plot-wise focus on something quite different to grab our attention, I guess, which, I mean, is something that happens all the time, but it's just not something that I personally enjoy a whole ton. I would much rather have a very big story that develops over a couple of books, rather than have separate books that are kind of like one episode and then there's an overarching story that kind of connects them to one another. But that's not to say that there aren't any exceptions to that where I have enjoyed that. So yeah, I mean, we'll see if there's even going to be a sequel or not. It's just that I was expecting this book to kind of round things out, and all of a sudden it opened things up. And I'm not talking about like an open ending, the way that some books have. I love open endings, but with an open ending, I mean like a dubious ending, or you know, not every single storyline is completely rounded off towards the end, so you don't necessarily know the answers to everything. This one is like written in the way of like, this is what we're going to start do next, you know, as if it's kind of really leaning into, this is what you need to prepare for as a reader in terms of the direction of the second book. So who knows, there might be a sequel coming for this one, and I'll probably at least check it out if that happens to be the case. But so yeah, those are the books that I'm going to be reading for this vlog. It is the 28th of February, Black History Month is ending, which of course does not mean that I will stop reading books by Black authors, but it is kind of like a fitting time to stop this particular themed vlog. I was able to add 3 books to the queer alphabet, so I think I'm now like 6 out of 9 in terms of my progress with that particular challenge, so that's good progress. Of course, we could have always done better than that, but I'm already very happy to have managed to get that like 2/3 of the way done, so it now no longer feels like I'm never making any progress when it comes to this one. And I do think that I want to be doing this a little bit more over the coming months, doing a themed vlog occasionally that also can help me with Herkiat, so that I can kind of hopefully still get this challenge fully completed. I already know a themed vlog that I might do in the month of March, but you know, you'll have to stick around to find out. But so yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely let me know if you have been reading books by Black authors and which one you recommend for the ones that you've currently read or just ones that you've read in the past. And yeah, see you guys in the next video. Bye!